going to draw your attention to SB 80 where we left off the other day. We do have a fiscal note. It's on its way, but I would ask for an overview from Amelia. Thank you.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. As a reminder, Senate Bill number 80, as amended by Senate Committee, has been re-referred to the committee. This bill had a hearing last year, January 31st of 2023. This bill relates to the Homestead Property Tax Refund Act and specifically to the newer claim that is related to increased property tax over a base year. And the bill as amended out of the Senate committee last year excluded Social Security payments from the definition of household income. It increased the base year appraised value of the homestead to $595,000 or less from the current $350,000 or less. It added an annual adjustment for that upper limit appraised value. It also had retroactivity to the beginning of the program and extended the filing deadline for tax year 2022. Last week, as you were working the bill, there were some amendments here in committee. One of those amendments was to increase the household income threshold from $50,000 to $80,000. And there was another motion that passed that was to remove the income limit eligibility requirement for disabled veterans using the language similar to what was found in the CCR of Senate Bill 8 last year. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, are there any questions? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So on the income, we simply increased the income to 80, but we did not put any indexing in that. We've done so much indexing recently, I'm not always following which one, where we have and where we have not. So we did not in this, correct? It's just a flat 80.
Senator, it currently has indexing in the bill, and we did not adjust that. That was the conference committee report, wasn't it? Thank you for asking for the clarification. I'll let Amelia answer that.
Okay. Madam Chair, currently this statute and this claim program does have an annual increase based on cost of living on the upper limit household income threshold. So the current $50,000 or less, that $50,000 is adjusted annually based on the current language of the law. The proposal of this bill, currently as it stands in Senate Bill 80 as amended by Senate Committee, would also include an annual adjustment for the appraised value threshold of the homestead based on a 10-year average of the change in residential real property in the state of Kansas.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, so it would have the increase on both the household valuation and the income. Thank you. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I thought that's where we had landed. And we were on the 80,000 and we're on 595,000 for the house valuation starting. Is that correct? Okay. That is correct. Okay. Thank you, committee. Committee, we were on Senator Blasey's motion to delete the 65 age requirement, so it would just be based on home valuation and household income. And there are fiscal notes on the way up. So I would ask if there's any discussion on that motion. None until we see the fiscal note. Senator Holland. And welcome back to the committee, Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee. And I apologize if this question was brought up. If the senator could maybe elaborate a little bit more, what's the policy thought behind getting rid of the 65 or older?
Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, the point I made last week to the committee was if this policy is geared towards helping people stay in their homes and give them property tax relief, suffering and struggling to stay in your home isn't just to a certain age group. It's all ages. We have single parents trying to raise kids, trying to stay in their homes, pay their bills. They're struggling too. So removing this would allow many more families to participate.
Thank you. And thank you, Eddie. Do you mind or John can pass them out? So, and just to be accurate, the motion was withdrawn. So we are back on the bill and we will entertain motions at this time.
So I'll make my motion to remove the age requirement. And then as we continue to discuss the fiscal note.
Okay, it's been moved. And seconded by Senator Clays. Discussion on the motion. Senator Holland and then Senator Corson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, so if I understand this, basically the fiscal impact, okay, is an additional then, would this be his then, does that encompass then the fiscal impact of him with us raising this to 80,000? Is that on top of that?
I will refer to Eddie, but I think it does. We want to make sure that where we're at on the amendments.
So no, the fiscal impact for Senator Blasey's request includes the bill as it exists now. If there are further adjustments to it, then those could add on top of it, but also they could have some synergy with it because it's not a purely additive, changing an age and changing an income, because if you do both, then obviously there's people who the age and income pieces come into play for. And so the department will need to, if you adopt more than one of these, the department will need to kind of rerun it with them combined. And that's true for any of the more than one. The same is true for the home valuation limit.
So Eddie, just to be clear, it was not ran with the amendment of the 80,000 household income. It's at the 50,000?
I believe that to be the case.
I think we're getting a yes from Revenue. And I want to thank Revenue for working so diligently on these. I know it took some time to put it together. Okay, so this would not include the amendment. Senator Blasey.
So just make sure I'm reading this correctly. So fiscal year 2026, under the current amendments in the bill of $80,000 income and all the other amendments, currently it's $42 million in fiscal year 2026. Is that correct? Is that the current fiscal note as the bill currently stands without the amendment, my amendment that I proposed?
Eddie.
Yeah, that's correct. That with the household income taken to 80,000, and the disabled veterans not having an applicable income limitation, the impact is the 60.7, the 42.0, and the 52.7.
So my amendment really adds 38 million to the total fiscal note.
No, Senator.
So the 80 million is an additional. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Senator Clays, or I'm sorry, I said Senator Corson and then Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm going to strongly oppose this amendment because I think what we're doing is really dramatically expanding this well beyond what this intended purpose was. I mean, we had a really positive, narrowly crafted bill that was addressing our disabled veterans and our fixed income seniors. And I'm worried that if we add this amendment on, that this bill is going to not pass. And I think this is must-have legislation for a community of people who really need this relief. And I don't know if this is intended to be a poison pill or if this is intended to stall the bill. But if you look at the fiscal impact, I think this is going from a bill that is very likely to pass with significant support to a bill that's probably very unlikely to pass. And I would hate us to not see that relief. I mean, we've talked about how we can address other groups of folks like our young parents. And we had a really positive hearing on 264 last week, which would address the child independent tax credit. I think that's a great way to provide relief to that age group. I don't doubt that we can do more for those folks, but I think if we're going to do that, it should be a separate bill. It should have a hearing on its own merits. We should be able to have proponents and opponents. I think an amendment like this, amendment that would dramatically change the entire program, I just don't think that's the process that we should follow to do this. So I'm strongly opposed to this, Madam Chair.
Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I seconded this motion, and afterwards I decided to run a couple of surveys. And so in my district and in Senator Blasey's district, I ran surveys to find out what people think of the different taxes that they're charged out there. And I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the property tax is the most hated and painful of the taxes that are out there. It cut across age groups, though. It doesn't impact one over the other. It certainly has an outsized impact when we remove a tax on one group of people and then place that burden on another. And I have a very hard time believing that it is advantageous for a society as a whole to take the tax burden and place it on those who are considering and contemplating raising families. So I am in support of this. I believe that we should offer tax relief to all Kansas citizens, especially those contemplating having children and raising children in our state. I think right now the tax burden on those individuals is outsized and it needs to be reduced. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, any other discussion? Senator Holland.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the comments from both sides, I guess, on this issue. When it comes to the amendment, I guess where I fall with this is, I've been struggling with this for nearly my entire 22 years in the legislature. And my concern has always been truly for fixed income homeowners. And because basically they are fixed income, they're either retired or they've been laid off from their jobs because their companies don't want them anymore. And the issue is that they've been paying their taxes for years on their domicile. And now they're being forced out because they can't make those property tax payments. Many of them have already paid off the mortgages long gone. I do believe that there are some issues here surrounding the pressure on all families. Specifically, I believe that when our local communities and even our state, when we basically abate, commercial property taxes, we squeeze that balloon and we shift that off on all parties. And so I fully understand the spirit of which the amendment that Senator Blasey is offering. I just would wonder if we need to be a little more direct in us controlling those offsets that both the state and the locals are providing our commercial developers. I think that would go a long way to keeping our younger families and folks in their homes. Because make no mistake, the younger folks, their income should be growing. They are investing in home ownerships early because they're trying to create value, and that home will continue to rise, and that's a good thing. But I guess I'm just concerned that this kind of removes the focus off of those fixed income folks. And so that's my concern with the amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think I understand what Senator Blasey is saying, and I would support the bill either way. But I would probably support this as well, mainly because I was a single mom and I did have a house, and it's extremely hard to pay those bills, especially when some people are exempt. And in my community, lots of people are exempt, and I had to pay all of those all of the time without any relief. And I think we also should not be, we should be understanding that local communities will probably have to raise their mill levy to some extent to still provide the services in their communities. So if we're going to pick and choose, I do think it needs to encompass a broader section of people in this type of a bill. Thank you.
Further discussion? Senator Holland.
I just want to clarify here, just so everybody understands. this bill that keeps the local communities whole. It does not require local communities to raise any more mills because it's coming, the offset's coming from the state general fund. So there's not a direct, I guess what I'm trying to say is there is not a direct cost in your community of by giving enhanced benefits to, say, the retirees or the disabled veterans, that somehow that's going to be increased through a mill levy come out of the pockets of everybody else. That's not true. It's going to come from the state general fund. So, thank you.
Further discussion? Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So it comes from the state general fund, which comes from income taxes charged to the exact people who we're talking about here. It comes from sales taxes that are charged to the people we're talking about here. It's, you can call it an offset. Yeah, it's not coming through the property tax, but it's coming from somewhere. Those are all tax dollars. They're all paid by the same taxpayers, acting like we're somehow exempt, whether it's another type of tax or the federal government's going to come in and save us. We're the taxpayers. We're all paying it. It's just a matter of who and who's going to be assigned the entirety of that burden. And right now, that burden lies squarely on working families in the state of Kansas. And that's why it's extremely important that we start addressing the outsized weight of the property tax on those individuals too. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further discussion? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And look, I mean, to be clear, this is something that potentially I would support, but I just don't like more than doubling the cost of a program through an amendment that we haven't had a hearing on. We haven't had the opportunity to have proponents and opponents. I mean, this would radically change the entire program. And so that's why at this point I can't support it, because we haven't had a chance to fully understand what the impact of this would be. If the senator wanted to bring this as a bill and we could have a hearing on it, we could have people in, we could better understand what we're doing. But to radically change the program with an amendment that more than doubles the cost of the bill, I just think that's not the right path for us. Thank you.
Senator Baumgardner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want us to be careful when we're talking about this. I want us to remember the veterans that were here, many of which, if they were not disabled, would be working. The retirees, they worked. Many of them started working, paying taxes as young teenagers. So I don't want us to cast this light on, well, it's everybody else who's able-bodied and working. They're going to pay for this. Many of the folks that were here that were veterans, not only did they work serving and protecting us in the armed services, but then they came back, retrained, and worked in private industry. They want to stay in Kansas. They know that most military individuals, what was the testimony? Most military individuals, when they have served their time, are leaving Kansas because as retirees, particularly those that are disabled, they can't afford to stay here. I just don't want us to cast a light that they are a burden. They are deserving of our respect. They're deserving of some assistance. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Further discussion? Senator Clays, then Senator Blades.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We do have a bill that deals with that particular topic. This is expanding what we just had hearings on, and it is expanding it in a pretty sizable way. And because it's doing that, I don't see any problem with taking that tax relief to everyone. There's certainly a way to go back to just dealing with our disabled veteran community. I think we can go past that bill today, just everybody says aye and we move that through, but this is now more than that. And as long as it's more than that, I'm going to support it covering everybody, not just a particular age group. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just want to thank the committee for all their comments. I think we've had a good discussion here this morning. I do also want to just echo what Senator Clays just said. The disabled veterans who were here last week testifying very passionately and who have been emailing me, and I'm sure every member of this committee, about the importance of House Bill 2036, I'm a strong supporter of, and I'm willing, if this chair wants to work it today, to pass it out.
Actually, Senator, we are going to work it today if we get to it. I don't think we will have time, but we do have to deal with the constitutionality of that bill. So,
Anyway, I just want to thank everybody for the comments. Thank you.
no, Senator, that's fine. If you have more comments, I didn't mean to. I just wanted you to know we are going to work it today. The plan is, you had a list emailed to you. I know it wasn't in priority order, but any other discussion? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. For clarification's sake, because of the discussion, this would be of staff. The fiscal note would go from currently Table 1 and then add in, well, I guess it's Table 1 as well. So the top one is, I'm looking at fiscal year 27. I'm looking at a couple years. The fiscal impact is 52.7 and 27. Do we then add the 102.4 to the 52, or is the 102.4 the total fiscal note should this amendment be adopted?
Eddie, do you mind?
It's actually, unfortunately, neither of those scenarios, and the reason I say unfortunately is that we don't actually have specifically what it would be because of the way that the various amendments would interact with each other. So the bill as it stands right now, I believe, is that top Table 1, because the committee has now amended it to the 80,000. The Table 1 under the line below, Senator Blasey's request, the amendment you're working on now, would be what the fiscal impact would have been were it not for that household income adjustment to 80,000 if this amendment were adopted. However, so that's based upon a $50,000, I believe is what the income limit was on the bill prior to the $80,000 amendment. There is interaction between those two amendments because the second table does not include the impact on people under the age of 65 with income between $50,000 and $80,000. And by the time that got folded in, the impact would be different than any of these numbers.
So, Madam Chairman, if I may, we don't have an accurate fiscal note in front of us.
Well, we have an accurate fiscal note, but it is not based off of the amendments that were in the bill. And we can request that, get that for another day. If the committee would like to, we could hold off on this.
I don't necessarily want to hold off, Madam Chairman, but I don't know if we can get what we call in the country a ballpark figure.
Not on this, Senator. It is too difficult to guesstimate on the values. You can't, it's not easily extrapolated from the values before us.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Committee, would you like to see the fiscal note with the amendments that are currently in the bill? I think it would make sense, but I don't know if it's going to change anyone's vote. Do you want to wait, or do you want to continue with the motion? Just vote? Okay. Committee wants to vote, so any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay? No. Chairman, motion fails. Division has been called. All those in favor, raise your hand. Oh, the vote changed. Okay. 6. All those opposed, raise your hand. Motion passes. We're back on the bill. Committee, we won't be able to move on this bill. We do not have an accurate fiscal note. I will request that number. And I would also, well, I won't make the other motion then now. as a result of this.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have an additional amendment if you want to continue the discussion today or for another day. It shouldn't have a fiscal impact, I don't think.
Senator, you just more than doubled the last one, so I'm not sure.
Well, we can find out.
What is your motion?
We can find out. Amelia, will you please pass out the amendment? It's in regards to school bonds, that when the voters go to the polls and vote to increase property taxes for a school bond, that increase is exempt from this bill. So if you're participating in this bill, if you vote to increase your own taxes for a school bond, you must pay the increase. I think it's about fairness and voting representation.
So Senator, you just would be excluding all of those families that have children in school from voting on a bond with your motion?
No, they're not excluded from voting on a bond. Every American has the right to vote, and they can go vote at the polls. But if the bond passes and there's an increase of property taxes, then it has to be applied to every property owner as current law. So the state wouldn't be paying for certain persons who went to the polls to go vote. Does that make sense?
No, Senator, it makes perfect sense.
Maybe Amelia
I
can
would
review.
like to see these introduced. I'm agreeing with Senator Corson. You are making some major changes to policy through amendments. I would like to see those as bill introductions so that we could have hearings on them. But we will entertain the motion. It is in order. So the motion has been made. Is there a second on the motion?
Second.
It's been moved by Senator Blasey, seconded by Senator Peck. Discussion on the motion.
Madam Chair, could we have Amelia just walk us through the impact of this? Would that be appropriate, Madam Chair?
It would be. Thank you. Amelia, do you mind?
Madam Chair, you can see the language of the balloon, the major part of the language on the second page. And what this would do is essentially exclude, remember as one of the members commented earlier, property owners are still paying their taxes under these provisions. And so this is a matter of the state calculating the amount of the claim under this provision that would be refunded or rebated to the homeowner. And what this would do is this would exclude the school district bond and interest levies from that claim process. So they would not be rebated any dollars related to bond and interest amounts that are in that calculation if there was an election that approved those bond and interest.
So thank you, Amelia. Committee, I was going to save this information, but I think it needs to come to light now. This legislation does put a burden on the state in order to give property tax relief for individuals. I've been looking at other states and watching what's going on internationally, not just within our nation. And we have done some research. Missouri, quite interestingly, has created legislation that the state does not pick up the rebate, but the counties do. And in researching that information, Amelia came off even better information. We found that, I think it was Amelia, maybe it was Eddie, I'm sorry, the Wichita and Topeka have started their own rebate programs. Are you aware of this, committee? No, exactly. So I think this needs to be studied in a much broader way than us just throwing darts at this type of legislation. Committee, I'm going to continue on this motion, but I think we need this information. I think we need to look at this long-term. I've always said that this program was a Band-Aid, not a solution, and we need a solution. I continue to look for a solution, but I think that the committee needs more information in order to be making some of the decisions before us. But that being said, are there any questions on the motion? Senator Peck.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm going to make a comment in the form of a question for the maker of the motion because I seconded it because of the understanding I have. My understanding is with this amendment, if local taxpayers vote for a bond which says, yes, I'm willing to pay additional property taxes for this bond issue for education, they're not then passing it off to the rest of us to pay their property taxes on a bond. And so I guess I don't see it as that complex, but I would ask if I'm misunderstanding for Senator Blasey to help enlighten me, because if a group of people vote to increase their own taxes, that's fine by me. Let them pay the increased taxes, not then move it off to some third party to pay. Is that, and I'll just ask the question, and then if you wish to recognize Senator Blasey, but is that a fair understanding of the amendment?
Senator Blasey.
Madam Chair, that is correct. So if property owner A is a part of this, participating in this program, and property owner B is not, but yet they both go vote at the polls to raise the tax is only going to be levied without this amendment on just B, and A will not have to pay. It only makes sense to me about fairness. If they're both going to participate in an election to raise taxes on themselves, they should be, both people have the liability of having to pay that increase. And the reason why it's only listed as school bond in the amendment is because that's my understanding, based with revisor. It's the only bonds we really go to the polls to vote for. That's the reason why schools are only specifically mentioned, but yes, your understanding is correct.
So if I may, every time that a school bond passes, you want to talk fairness, all of us pay for it because a portion of that comes out of the state general fund. So that is not fair that a small body of the state is voting on that bond and the rest of us get to pick up that tab. In fact, the last time I looked, I haven't looked for a few years, $6 billion is the state deficit for bonding for K through 12 that we are in debt for. I know that was attempted to change a few years ago, but it has not been addressed for a while. So yes, our tax code is not fair, and this committee is trying to address that. In fact, I'll go ahead and I'll make the bill request by the end of committee so that you know what's coming. It addresses some of this issue because we are putting a tax burden on individuals that do not have a say, and so this committee will be addressing that. Committee, any other discussion on the amendment? Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, Senator Blasey keeps talking about if you vote to raise your own taxes or if you vote in this bond issuance, but this affects people who don't vote in the bond issuance. This affects people who may have voted against the bond issuance, right? It's everybody in that community, whether or not you voted or not, whether or not you voted for or against it. So I just want everybody to understand that, because it's been framed as, I can't go and vote for it and then get a rebate on that, but it's even if I voted against it, or it's if I didn't vote at all, right? And so just for clarification, I mean, to be honest, I think with what we did with the amendment, I know Madam Chair can work miracles, but I'm sort of feel like we've kind of killed this bill, to be honest, with what we did with the price tag, and, feel like this was kind of a vanity project by, one person but
Senator, please don't try to anticipate what somebody's, I understand what you feel, but we can't read minds in this committee. So committee, any other discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Well, committee, any other information that's needed on this bill before we move forward? We will wait on the fiscal note. We will not work the bill today. Committee, since we're between bills, I will make the bill request now. I'll return to that topic. I am making a bill request to address any tax abatements that are given in a community would disqualify the local governing bodies from increasing above revenue neutral. Excuse me, I was just corrected. I've already made that request, so I will remind the committee that that bill has been introduced. So thank you, Amelia. And we will be having a hearing on that bill because we are picking and choosing winners and losers by giving them tax abatements, and all of us pay for it, especially the locals at that level. So we will be having that hearing. Committee, I'll turn your attention to 2036. Amelia, will you give us an overview, please?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, House Bill number 2036, as amended by the House Committee of the Whole, was a bill that would provide a property tax exemption for homestead property of certain disabled veterans. The hearing was started on January 17th, and then I believe it was continued for, I can't remember the exact date, but it was continued for more time. The bill would provide a property tax exemption for all homestead property owned and actually and regularly occupied and used predominantly as a residence by a disabled veteran or any surviving spouse thereof, commencing in tax year 2024. To the extent that are provided in the bill, the exemptions were certain percentages of the assessed value of the homestead based on the disability rating of the disabled veteran. And then there were also full exemptions for disabled veterans who are permanently confined to a wheelchair or who had a disability rating of at least 70% from a service-connected disability, and also a full exemption for a disabled veteran 65 years of age or older. And if a property qualified for one of these exemptions, then they would not be eligible for refunds under the Homestead Property Tax Refund Act. And I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Amelia. Committee, any questions? Senator Reddy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can't find it in my text right now, but there was mention, I believe by Representative Proctor, that there would be funds set aside to make something whole. Was that not in this bill?
Senator Reddy, that is Representative Proctor's wishes. He wishes for an amendment to be added that would do that. However, that amendment does not address the issue of this is definitely picking winners and losers, not saying that they should or shouldn't be, just the fact that our state constitution doesn't allow for that in property taxes. The way that we have state programs have been created for rebates or refunds, and that is what we were dealing with in Senate Bill 80. However, Senate Bill 2036 does not do that. It just specifically spells out a certain group, and it gives them a tax cut. It does not deal with the constitutional language. So committee, I do know we need amendments to this legislation. Is there any prepared? Okay, so committee, we will not move on this legislation today. We will not be able to, but I want you, Senator Holland.
And I do appreciate, Madam Chair, you having the hearing on Senate Bill 2036. I guess what I was struck by the hearing is that the sponsor of the bill, the originator, the good representative, I guess I was a little bit concerned from the perspective of it seemed like when he put together his bill language, I don't know if that was last year or the year before, that I was I guess I was taken by the lack of awareness of what we had passed in 2022, the HB, Senate Substitute 2289, obviously the Senate Bill 80,
2239.
2239, I'm sorry, I screwed that number up, I'm sorry.
Okay.
So basically, and we saw it again in the Senate Bill 80, once again, something for our disabled veterans along with our fixed income seniors. And I guess we have the constitutionality questions about 2036 as far as assigning specific classes different assessed valuation of property than others. But I guess my thought is that I'm not sure where he was of when we put that 2239 together and got that passed. Now we have Senate Bill 80. I'm just asking the committee, I like others' thoughts on how they look at those two bills from the needs of addressing disabled veterans. Do we need separate set-aside legislation specifically for the disabled veterans as outlined in 2236, given the fact that we attempted to address it in 2239, and we attempt to, I guess, expand those benefits to our disabled veterans under the same construct of a rebate like we've done for our retirees in that scheme. And so that's just my question to the committee, because that's kind of what I'm wrestling with as we look at those two bills. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Committee, any other discussion on the bill? Any comments? Seeing none. Committee will return back to this at a later date. Is there any other business to be brought before the committee? Seeing none, we're adjourned. Thank you for your work, committee.